one of of course, the questions I have is, to all of us, is, what are the particular challenges, questions, quests that you came with? What are the things that you say, this I want to touch on, this I would like to address, this I would like to open up for me? And then, when you've answered this, you'll ask yourself the same question again, and what's the real thing I should be addressing? Not the one that I state for myself because I can handle that one, but the one that I shouldn't and I don't really want to, but I know somewhere would be the real place I need to go. So that's what I want us to talk about as the preparation for tomorrow, because tomorrow we won't be talking so much societally, and we will really be, each of you in your various workshops, addressing your own claims and stakes and aches. Voila. So, this thing is not very useful here, huh? It's like in the middle of us.
And I want to, so the stable ambiguity, oh, that's a great term. See, she's more eloquent than I am. It's
a term from my colleague Terry Real. I did borrow it.
And I think it's great because it's one of the things we think about as relationship scientists is often relationships. One of the features of them is, is vulnerability. And how do we show vulnerability? And you don't have to in that context. In terms of how we think about the building blocks of a close relationship, so shared understanding, exposure, vulnerability, you can kind of fully remove it by keeping someone a little bit at bay, never really building that.
Yeah, because one of my patients once said it very well to me. She said, I find a lot more security in my MBA than in a relationship. I thought that's a statement. And it's not just hers. Could be any degree for that matter. But there is something about the tenuousness of relationships. This notion of the real tenuousness, the brittleness of it, that makes it much more scary, right? So, let's talk together. What are you listening? What are you hearing? Let's do that. Yeah, where is that?
I can run.
No, you do, because you have people behind you, and they want to hear you.
Yeah, the thought occurs to me that...
This thing is not on.
Not turned on? Okay.
Yes.
It should be on. Test one?
No. Up.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
What's your name?
David.
Good. Hello, David.
Yeah, hi. I've been feeling lately that the quality of the relationship that I have with myself probably informs and equates with the relationship that I'd have with another person. And I'd like to invite you guys to speak to that. Meaning,
if I'm kind to myself, I'm nicer to others?
If I can love myself deeply and care for myself deeply, then that helps have an exterior relationship as well. And can I ask you, among the many, many, many feelings one can have about oneself, what's one that visits you often? Sorry, repeat the
Among the many feelings that one can have about oneself, that you can have about you, which is one of the ones that visits you often?
That I really care and love myself.
That's a feeling you have or want to have?
Yeah, I do. No, I do have that.
Okay. Yes. Where are you people? Wake up.
I don't know if are you gonna answer the questions? Because I was, sorry. I'll just say what I was gonna say.
So here's what I do. Typically, I collect a bunch, and then I see what are the themes.
Amazing. Okay. So what's coming up for me is I just wanted to hear maybe a little bit about loneliness. So I'm hearing from Justin that we have more single people than ever. That you kind of suggested we were in a loneliness epidemic, but I was wondering what your actual view was. And then I'm also hearing that right now in the self-expression marriage that you were talking about is people are balancing their need for individualism along with their need for cohabitation and marriage and whatnot. And so it seems like everyone is on their individual path, and we end up all being a little bit lonely as a result. And two other things about it. I'm wondering if there's like any data with like dating that you have around like dating apps, like because now with the pictures, like things are a lot more superficial. And I'm wondering about like the 300-pound guy that has like no matches and is on Tinder like 10 hours a day, and then like the imbalances that are created as a result. And then I'm also wondering, because I'm just part of a lot of like queer, polyamorous, non-monogamous, ethical non-monogamous communities, and who are just like, let's all date each other. And I know that you tackle a lot of just the enormous resistances that people have around like people like, you know, non-monogamy is like worse than like, you know, dating your mom or something, like for a lot of folks. No, not you. Oh, you've tackled the issue in different ways.
I met I met one of the founders of Tinder a couple of weeks ago. I had an interesting chat. But that's in relation to, anyway, I'll come back to that. Yes. Now they pay. Yep, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
The question,
and your name?
I'm Kathy.
Kathy. Lindsay, can you write? Are you here? She just stepped out? Okay, maybe I take notes when you can write just so I remember them. Thank you. Yes.
The question or comment I would love to hear some input on is vulnerability. So I feel like everybody screws up because they're scared of being vulnerable. You work too hard, you have multiple partners, you have affairs. It's all this horrendous fear of being vulnerable. And so how do you get to the point of me wanting to be vulnerable and the other person wanting to be vulnerable? And I don't care if that's siblings and how jerky they have to act or how jerky we see them acting, or parents, or just overall all relationships.
I'll just tell you one thing I was thinking while you're talking is that, you know, it's tough to deal with vulnerability when fake news has permeated not just politics, but also the personal realm. People spend their whole time curating their lives and their stories behind walls and filters, and nobody's actually talking about the truth, which is part of why... Shadows. Yes. You know, yes, which is part of why I did the podcast. I thought, you know, are we going to tell the stories that are really happening to people? So that makes vulnerability a lot more difficult because it looks like you're the only one. Enfin, not the only one, but not like those happy people. Yes. Yes, yes.
I'm Brad. I'm beginning to wonder if I'm in the right place. I was here for the 401k investment session. But since I'm here, I'll ask a question. I kind of going to what he said about loneliness.
Where are you? You're there. Yes.
So many people have moved far away from where they were born, and they're separated from their family and their friends, and everybody's very, spread apart. And I think that that has a big effect. For me, it has a big effect on what I personally call is like the pillars of self-esteem, because you don't have that reinforcement of certainty around the people in your life, because so many people are either that were once important are now far removed, and you're kind of having lots of rounds of friends that come through your life that I don't think existed maybe 50 years ago or whatever. That's my question. And I don't know how you diversify a bond fund.
I don't know how you diversify your fund. I will diversify your relational fund. I do have ideas about that, yes.
Hi, I'm Michelle. My question is about, you were talking about vulnerability, and I was thinking about vulnerability and transparency and authenticity, and bringing those three as strengths in a world where everyone is just swiping and you can't even smell the person or taste them or touch them. How are you supposed to bring these sort of really, I think, integral and powerful pieces of who we are in building relationships when it's just swipe, swipe, swipe?
And when we think of the magnitude of that effect, like the magnitude of that, right? So I like data. So the last time Tinder released data on how many swipes they get in a day was a year and a half ago, and it's probably gone up. 1.8 billion swipes a day. Billion swipes in a day. Right? Only 26 million matches. It's a match rate of 1.44%, so keep swiping. But it is to suggest, right, that whether or not it's effective is that is an enormous amount of data from people like me, but an enormous engagement with this sort of, when we say, is it a swipe world? 1.8 billion swipes. It is a swipe world. The sort of way we're connecting is different. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Nikki, and I just find it fascinating, this notion that we used to look to a much broader community for all of the things that we found to be important, right? Shelter and whose roles and responsibilities. It was very clear. And I love this notion of it being all negotiable at this point. And how realistic is it to be able to expect or to want to be able to find all these different aspects and attributes in one person, in a partner. So something to help us navigate that around partnership, or should we be looking for it in other areas in a broader community?
Great. There was one of the, here. And then we'll go back and start to answer a little bit. Yes.
So,
your name?
In a nutshell, I'm Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. In a nutshell, when I was younger, I used to chase love and intimacy, and it would run away and it wouldn't come. And then I spent years alone and getting to know myself and being authentic and, a long time alone and facing aloneness. And lately, love's come knocking on my door, and I'm scared to death. But it seems to be, I'm okay with being vulnerable, but there's a sense of dying or something into it. It's really hard to explain, and I might be connected to maybe some sort of awakening or spiritual awakening or something. I don't know if you have any thoughts or ideas on that
When
experience.
you say the word death, you talk about loss of yourself as you you let somebody else in? Is that what you mean?
Perhaps, and maybe it's more like a heart-crushing sensation, or like a breaking open into something bigger. Maybe there will be some light shed on this during this weekend.
Yeah? We're going back? Where's the... Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all for sharing those.
So here's the thing, people. This is not questions, many that you've asked that have an answer. There's just this thinking about them. And I think it's going to be a lot more vivid if we all think together and not just us here as the supposed experts. That many people have thought about some of these things at great length, right? But I think since the word of vulnerability keeps coming up, what's your thought? Why is that word suddenly become has such currency? It's like Brené Brown et al. No, it's very interesting. So 20 years ago, nobody talked about vulnerability the whole time, So something about it, to me, is really interesting. And I'm curious what you think. I have thoughts, too.
I think I like what you said about this authentic self. I think part of it is... So if we the research side, as part of what we know about what builds a close relationship, right? So some of you might be familiar with that New York Times piece on the Aaron task, the 36 questions you can ask someone in 3 hours, right?
They're very good. They're very good. If every time you want to do an interesting chat for a long ride, just go Google 36 questions you're going to get. It'll make for an interesting chat between you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was developed by psychologist Arthur Aaron at Stony Brook. And it's... part of what that does is, it says you can fall in love with 3 hours. That's not what it does. What it does is it forces you to build a close relationship in short order. What are 3 things you like about me? What are 3 things I like about you? What's something that you dislike about me? Right? So what you do is you rapidly go through the steps of a close relationship, and vulnerability becomes part of that, exposing yourself to another person. That it's the same thing, actually, even as something like sexting, right? 19% of men and 19% of women and 23% of men share a sex with friends that they receive, and on average with more than 3 friends. Right? So,
Say that again.
So 1 in 5 people, if you sex someone, 1 in 5 share it with other people. right? They share it with friends. A sext, a sexual image or photo. Yeah, S-E-X-T. Sorry. And yeah, not a text, a sext. So, right? So, but what that is, now for some people though, sexting actually might build it might have positive effects on a relationship. And that's because you're vulnerable to your partner. You send that image to them, and you know that they can then send it on to other people. Now, 1 in 5 do, so, depends on if you're a gambling person or not.
How do you remember all these numbers?
I published a study. Because I live in my little data bubble.
Unbelievable.
Right, so we know that vulnerability in a relationship can be erotic. It could be exhilarating. It could be this person could bury me. Right? This person could kill me. This person, maybe not literally, but enter your reputation, your emotions, your career.
That goes back to the question in the back about you're opening up to someone and love comes knocking at your door. That's the connection here.
Yeah. So I think that's this piece of vulnerability that it can be exciting. But it's also challenging, and I think I love your point that it's at a time that how do we know it's still real? How do we know it's still honest? People are in search of the sort of honest relationship.
And it also goes to the question about transparency. But I also think, what was scary before? What were people scared of before they had this fear of being vulnerable? Huh?
Getting pregnant.
Yes.
Getting divorced.
Yes. Boredom. Yeah. I mean, I don't have an answer in mind. But I'm thinking, there's always been social control. There's always been something that we were scared of that other people would know. It used to be called sin. I mean, people, what was it that you did that was going to expose you? It was sinful behavior, and it was shameful behavior. Today you don't necessarily, shame is no longer a bad thing. It's the thing that you should clear yourself from half the time, right? It's like we're in the reverse position around shame on a general level. But vulnerability becomes the thing that is the stuff that's going to expose you. And I think it is vulnerability because it is the thing that comes hand in hand with individualism. If I go to other parts of the world, I tell you, I don't talk about vulnerability. It's not what they are concerned with. That has to do with the fact that we have developed a whole notion that is, first of all, performative. We are by virtue of what we do, by virtue of what we achieve, by virtue of what we stand for, and the authenticity is a direct part of that, and we are solely accountable for what we do, and so the vulnerability becomes kind of the assessment of me. What the essence of me that I put out to you, and how you're going to respond to it. And that's why I think vulnerability has become this salient piece at this moment that everyone talks about. And also because it's the thing you can't control. And we live in an era where we really think that so much of our life is things that we can control. Make God laugh, but still, And so vulnerability you don't control. It's but when you talk, I forgot your name, the woman with the love knocking at your door. Karen, that's right. I don't know of that experience of love that isn't terrifying and exciting at the same time. That is the whole point. That excitement and insecurity clash to each other like this, because you are in the midst of something that is opening you up, to which you are invited to surrender with, and part of you is dying to do it, and part of you is terrified of doing it. And this is part of the ingredients of the experience of love. Anybody who has ever loved deeply lives with the fear of loss. They come together. Anyone who's ever had a child knows it, but it's not just, it's kind of because it's so visceral, but that's not the only time. I don't think there is love without the fear of loss. You can pretend on occasion to numb it a little bit and silence it, but they literally live side by side. The more you connect to something, the more you live with the terror of losing that connection. And that is called vulnerability today. You can call it vulnerability or you can call it love.
And one way to think of this, so who here has ever had a romantic attraction towards someone and you get butterflies in your stomach? Do you ever feel that? Who here has ever gotten sweaty palms if you're around that person and you sort of start to perspire? Who has ever, they were there and they were next to you and you couldn't form a sentence? Mm-hmm. Right? So those feelings, right?
And who has got to run to the bathroom?
Yeah. Right, that feeling, your heart's racing, you're sweating, you have butterflies in your stomach. That's the rise of dopamine, the plummet of serotonin. It's a physiological response. What would you do if you had that same feeling in the middle of a major exam? You would say, holy, I'm having an anxiety attack, right? So that feeling, back to it's what you said, that feeling, it's physiologically, it's similar, right? So when we say that part of what a love relationship is that you start to feel anxious, you do feel it, and you're having a physiological anxiety attack. You do feel anxious. It's okay to own it. It's okay to say that. It's a different context, right? But the body is responding. It's not just up here, it's up here, and it's in here, and it's in here, and it's in here. It's a biopsychosocial kind of response. So exactly what Esther's describing, right, is that that is, we respond that way, and it's a different valence. Different context. We think of it different, but that's a rough one, right? I mean, if we think of it in a different, you wouldn't want that. You might be fun on a date, but wouldn't want it, at work. I mean, maybe people do. Well, anyway, it's another talk for another day. Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. And then there was somebody here. Yeah.
You mentioned the word danger.
Yes.
I think that's sort of at the root of if you love too much, you can fall, and the heartache is like paralyzing. Now, I can't even fathom like divorces and they're suing each other and they're just livid and how do you live with that on top of living a normal life? You're not, you get overwhelmed, I would think, that.
So I will tell you something. I have a whole thing, when it's like loving too much, and I don't understand it. Seriously, I don't understand it. It's like this notion of too little and too much. Because you don't have the big institution giving you the rules, we are constantly barraged with measurements of disorders of control and discipline. They are called addictions. Everything is an addiction around what is excessive and what is not controlled. And by the way, you have to control it all yourself. There is no chicken waking you up in the morning, what you call it, rooster, calling you, everything is you. You have to decide when you wake up, when you go to sleep, how much screen time you do, how much gym you do, how much eating you do, how much praying you do. It's all on you. The burdens of the self have never been heavier. And it's being done with this constant barrage of too much and too little and the right amount and what is healthy and what is normal. And that drives, to me, I think there's a lot of people really crazy. And on top of it, if you have to do it alone because you left your family behind, or you have to do it alone because you think that you have just one person, to me, it is absolutely clear that the person who took us to the forest today, he showed us the redwood forest, the trees, and he said, social contentment is what these trees need in order to survive, and so do people. Meaning, these redwood trees, they are always in groups. Otherwise, they will die younger. And it is the same for us. And it's true that we used to have long-term relationships, but let's not romanticize, because when you were stuck with those relationships, it wasn't really good. And you had nowhere to go. And if you didn't do it at first, you didn't do it ever again. We have a blessing today of being able to make new friendships at any stage of life and love relationships at any stage of life, things which never existed. There's a fluidity about that is really wonderful, but we have to take advantage of it. And to your question about one person for everything, I think it's a joke. It is absolutely clear that there is not a single person who can satisfy like that. And that strong relationships, thriving relationships, are all relationships that are diversified. That's the research of Eli Finkel as well. It's clear that these are people who have strong connections with other people besides their partner. They don't try to have the partner be the source of everything. I don't know where that came from, you know. And so that is an easy one to answer. It is a myth. It is a weight on people. It depletes the relationship. It's a tall order for a party of two. It's not a single person can meet all of that. Neither should it be. And what needs to happen is the direct initiatives constantly of bringing other people into our lives. But there is a problem. There is a problem because in this society, if you look on Google, friendship between men and women, the first 100 articles tell you it's impossible. Let's begin with that. What the hell is going on? Why is it impossible? You know, then, you know, there is a new thing called emotional infidelity. God forbid you actually share the depth of your life with other people, you know, that too is no longer allowed. It's like become this incubator where everything has to be stuffed into one place. And then people are surprised they choke. So that's my answer to those questions. All right. This being said, I'm going to hold this on for tomorrow because we're going to continue and there's going to be many other people with us. Have a little notebook, write down your thoughts, write down your questions, talk to somebody you don't know, ask them how they are, be curious about them. Don't just stick around with the person that you came with. In fact, find somebody you don't know and tell them something that you would like to do better with your partner and ask them for input. Everybody has great ideas for others. Good night.